This video is brought to you by Law Excellence IAS Academy.
Dear students, good morning. Welcome to Deep Daily Editorial Enrichment Program of Law Excellence R&D. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 8th July 2019. The first article for discussion, the search for a Chakraya. So this article is about revamping the Congress party. You know that Congress party is in shambles today, and consecutively it has lost the position of opposition in Lok Sabha. What can be the reasons for its fall? The first is dynasty is both a strength and also a weakness of Congress party. So, as politics are revolving around certain family, and that family has a sense of entitlement towards the party, then its moral authority to question the opposition, to question the regional parties which are playing the same dynastic politics is getting weakened. Today, the moral authority of the Congress got weakened, and the politics of the Congress are more revolving around the people rather than about the ideology. So, the dynastic politics are also a reason for ideological weakness or lack of its own ideology. And the second is internal democracy. During the time of independence, the Congress president is meticulously elected, where the district councils or district Congress committees will elect the state or Pradesh Congress committee chief, who in turn will elect the AICC, and this AICC will elect the Congress president. And this Congress president enjoyed huge control over the Congress working committee. He will select his own working committee. So this kind of internal democracy was weakened, especially during the time of Indira Gandhi era. And there is another thing, the Prime Minister's position and the party chief position started in one single hand during the Indira Gandhi era. So during Nehru era, Kamraj was another power center. He used to manage the Congress politics, party politics. Nehru used to manage the government. During Indira Gandhi era, she held both the party post and also the government position. Because of this, the party president is unable to give sufficient time to the politics. And the second thing is, BJP's growth is more surrounding an ideology. So Congress ideological stand started weakening, and many split factions have appeared in Congress. The major reason is there is no ideological glue that was binding them. So if Congress has to be revived, these things have to be brought in back. In this case, Rahul Gandhi resignation to the Congress party and sticking to it to an extent is gaining back on the moral authority to question. And the second thing is the internal democracy of the party, it has to be revived. If after the resignation of Mr. Rahul Gandhi, another puppet is placed in that position, it will be of no use. So, reinvigoration of the party happens from the sense of empowerment among the party workers. This sense of empowerment comes not from psychophancy, but from the real democratic work happening at the grassroots levels. So, the internal democracy has to play a critical role. In this article, a word of advice. So, what he states is today, Congress has to follow the example of Swaraj Party in 1923. Mr. Das, C.R. Das, Chittaranjan Das, he was the head of the Swaraj Party and Motilal Nehru were the secretary. And these two people have actively played the role of opposition within the legislature. The Congress is expected to play the similar role, opposing the government, its policies, its stance, its actions, so that there can be an effective opposition built from inside and also from outside. This is what essential for the revival of the Congress. In this case, an example was given about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Mr. Subhash Chandra Bose and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and Mr. Patabi Sitaramaya, these were the contestants. Now, Patabi Sitaramaya was supported by Gandhiji, but Subhash Chandra Bose got elected as the president of the Congress. That was the strength of the internal democracy. So then, what about this Chakraya? Gandhiji has stated the name of Chakraya. If he was alive, he would have recommended his name for the Congress president after independence. He is an impeccable worker, not touched by authority, not touched by money, not touched by power or position, are not touched by influence. So a Congress president has to be like that. He shall not be close to crony capitalists, and he shall not be dwindled by money power or power of influence or power politics. So this person has to be kind of a saint. That's what indirectly this article states about. The next article for discussion, reclaiming the Indo-Pacific narrative. We already understood something about Indo-Pacific in the last week deep. Every country has its own narrative on the Indo-Pacific. So Indo-Pacific, there is one important aspect, that is the centrality of the ASEAN. So Indo-Pacific for United States of America, it is more a security dimension. And China is not accepting this Indo-Pacific narrative because China feels that this has been brought in by the United States of America to contain its power in the region. So in this context, the South China Sea issue is a major contest between powers. So that's why the ASEAN is a central region in Indo-Pacific. So what the interest of the ASEAN over here, if this region becomes a place for contestation among major powers, obviously it has to suffer from series of wars. That's why rather than seeing it from security dimension, ASEAN wants to see it from the economic, trade, infrastructure and connectivity dimension. So the ASEAN says India Pacific shall be a region of prosperity. In this context, USA sees the Indo-Pacific as a region from the west coast of US to the west coast of India. But India sees the Indo-Pacific from the coast of Africa, east coast of Africa, to the west coast of the United States of America. The region is too large for India. And the second, if you talk about Japan and Australia, they already have given open and free doctrine for Indo-Pacific. It means that there has to be freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific waters and overflight. So as of now, South China Sea, China is claiming its rights over various islands. In this case, there is contestation from ASEAN countries, especially Philippines, Vietnam, and also Malaysia, Indonesia also makes lighter claims. So this containing the China or solving the South China Sea issue, or at least developing a code of conduct in South China Sea, is essential. So what India says with regard to Indo-Pacific is there has to be rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific for the free conduct of the trade, which can lead to the collective prosperity of everyone. At Shangri-La Dialogue, India has clearly recognized the centrality of ASEAN with regard to Indo-Pacific is concerned. This is the essence of this article. The next is no easy answer to economic slowdown. So in this case, Ms. Nirmala Sritaraman, she has assumed that if fiscal deficit is being contained, automatically it leads to the private investments. So the economic survey has clearly stated that the private investments and private sector shall nurture the growth, shall bring in the economic growth. If we want to become 5 trillion economy, then obviously around 8% of the real economic growth has to happen. That can happen only through the private sector. So in this case, what our budget has depended on is, if fiscal deficit is very high, to fill this fiscal deficit, we have to spend more on private public sector. It means that higher fiscal deficit, more will be the borrowing by the government. The more borrowing by the government leads to crowding of capital. So this crowding out of capital means the available capital, available savings, these will be taken away by the government and leaving little to the private sector. As little money is available for private sector, ultimately it leads to increase in rates, and increased rates will lead to decrease in private investments. So that's why the finance minister wants to maintain the minimal fiscal deficit. Now when we see budget, there is a revenue side, expenditure side. So revenue receipt side, we have revenue side, we have revenue receipts, revenue expenditure, capital side, capital receipts and capital expenditure. In revenue receipts, tax receipts, non-tax receipts. And then revenue expenditure side, subsidies, welfare programs, defense expenditure, all this comes out. In capital receipts, disinvestment, sale of assets, borrowings. In this case, with regard to the revenue receipts side, the government is worried about reduction in tax to GDP ratio. Actually, till 2014, we saw rise in tax to GDP ratio, but today it is falling, especially the introduction of the GST and its enable our or else GST not getting stabilized, its revenues not getting stabilized, is the major reason for the fall in tax to GDP ratio. In the long run, India has to raise its tax to GDP ratio. There is no other go. It means more people has to be brought in tax net. And the second part here is when the tax to GDP ratio is being raised, the amount of indirect taxes has to come down, amount of the direct taxes has to increase. But both direct and indirect taxes are slowing down. This tax to GDP ratio is slowing down. And the non-tax revenues, here government expects a lot from dividends. So in this, government is depending majorly on dividend from RBI. But on this, a committee is appointed that is called Bimal Jalan Committee. And Bimal Jalan Committee did not recommend in favor of transferring all the dividends at a single go to the government. So the report is not yet out. Let us wait and see. And the other hand, in the revenue expenditure side, the subsidies have come down, especially the fuel subsidies have decreased. On the other side, the welfare programs, especially like PM Kisan, Ayushman Bharat, these got a renewed focus. So expenditure got shifted from subsidies to the welfare. And the second thing the government wants to look at is the capital receipts. Disinvestments is one thing, where the strategic sale of profit making PSUs is been proposed. A strategic sale means less than 51%. Second, our PSUs possess enormous amount of land bank. Sale of this land bank is stated to be the another reason. And finally, the government is also looking at borrowings. India's external debt is less than 5%. So government wants to raise the bar in this and borrow from outside if necessary. So based on this, government is going to bring the fiscal deficit back to normal to avoid the crowding out of capital. So today the stated fiscal deficit target is 3.3% for 2019-20. Then what challenges? The first is there is an assumption that once the banking sector is revived, or once the credit growth in the banking sector is revised, ultimately it will lead to increased private investments. Here, one factor which is ignored is twin balance sheet problem. It means many of the private companies are still facing a negative balance sheet, which is affecting the banking sector. So banking sector revival is essential. At the same time, the revival of the private sector is also essential. In this twin balance sheet problem, we have to ensure as much as rehabilitation of the companies and banking sector as possible. So in this case, capital infusion is very much important. In the case of the capital infusion, 70,000 crore rupees is being proposed, which is being staggered over years. In this context, providing for more funds for banking revival is essential. And the second is the policy environment, though improved, I think it needs further improvement so that the decisions can be made quickly. Most of the times, the non performance of the infrastructure companies is due to poor policy environment. Most of the infrastructure projects, due to environmental clearances or otherwise, they got stopped in between. And the next, NBFCs are also facing a liquidity crisis. Now, the present budget says that the banks, commercial banks, can buy the pooled assets of the NBFCs. What it is saying is, healthy NBFCs, from there they have to buy the pooled assets, and there is a risk guarantee up to 10% for 6 months, which can be provided by the government. So NBFCs are not being bailed out. Only the profit making or the assets which are there with them, which are highly valuable, these can be transferred to the private sector, that is commercial banks. This is what we have. The next is quota politics. Now, what is the context of this article? Mr. Yogi Adityanath's government in UP proposed to transfer 17 castes from the OBC list to the SC category. It means that they are going to get a reservation benefit under the SC category. So, SC category reservation, on what basis it was brought in? Is this a backwardness or discrimination? It is based on discrimination. The SC category thing is brought on social discrimination and untouchability. So this has to be corrected. And the second thing is, as discrimination is the factor, the OBC categories which are coming into this, these are not discriminated. These are economically backward. So it means that there is no proper ground. The second thing, is it legally possible? As per the Article 341, any inclusion or exclusion of a social group in the SC category can only be done by the Parliament. So, as there is no parliamentary approval for this, this will not be legally valid. And to that extent, the Allahabad High Court has made it clear. So, these politics of reservations have to be avoided by the political parties. It is more of kind of riding a tiger. So, the same trick was done by Mr. Akhilesh Yadav, Mulayam Singh Yadav. And Mayawati is very much opposite to this because as coming up of the new castes in the SC category will diminish their space or diminish their opportunities. So anyhow, the politics of reservations and affirmative action shall see the end in India. And the next is crimes that Indian statute books have failed to define. So this is about the mass deaths. If you take a communal violence, there is a mass violence that is getting propagated against one community by the other community. Normally, the minority community will be the victim in the hands of the majority community. And the second, today we have mass lynchings, mob violence in India. So, how they have to be treated? Do we have any specific provision in Indian Penal Code? No. The reason is Indian Penal Code is against the offences which are committed by an individual. But when a group is committing an offences, mob is committing an offences, there is no proper legal code in India. In this context, these crimes or offences are defined as crimes against humanity by the Rome Statute, which has given rise to the creation of International Criminal Court. It means under International Criminal Court, we have a set of crimes which are called crimes against humanity. And these crimes against humanity are defined as widespread, systemic attack directed against any civilian population with the knowledge of the attack. It means it shall not be spontaneous and it has to be pre planned, it has to be systematic, it has to be widespread, and it has to affect the civilian population, not any armed groups. So, in this context, India has certain objections to it widespread and systematic. To prove that any of the offense is not a crime against humanity, so this widespread and systematic is too general to be defined according to India. And next is internal and international crimes. This is the classification. India is worried about its internal things. Let's take Naxalism. So, India, if it wages or else takes a serious action against Naxalism or cessationist groups, obviously that can be concluded as a crime against humanity by the Indian forces. Remember carefully, this talks about civilian population. Then what about the armed groups? Do these armed groups comes under the definition of civilian population? Then it will be left to the interpretation of the International Criminal Court, which India do not want to give it a chance. And third is the enforced disappearances of the people are also included as crimes against humanity. And these three things can put the Indian state in the court. That's why Indian state is not ready for this. The next, Indo-Afghan trade chokes on US curbs. You know that Iran is being imposed with sanctions by the United States of America. India is building a port called Chabahar Port. This is an alternative trade route to Afghanistan. As the sanctions have crippled the Iran, India also has decreased its budget allocations to the building of Chabahar Port. And the second is air route is another thing to move the perishable goods from Afghanistan to India, and Pakistan banning the Indian flights over its airspace is another choking point between India Afghanistan trade. Next, Iran to breach uranium enrichment cap. As for the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the cap for enrichment was 3.67%. Now, this 20% is the capability which Iran could have enriched, but it was reduced to 3.67%. So, this 20% enriched uranium can be used in the case of in the case of nuclear reactors, up to 5% is required, but it has got the capacity up to 20%. If it has to be weapons grade, it has to be 90%. So, in this context, the Iran breaching this is a kind of a warning which was given to the other partners to the JCPOA. So China, Russia, European Union countries like Germany, France, all these were the partners to this Iran nuclear deal. US has unilaterally withdrew from that, and if Iran slowly withdrawing it for every 60 days is kind of a warning. But Iran has clearly declared that still the diplomacy is open. So we have to wait and see. Karnataka crisis, as there is a coalition government in Karnataka which is made up of Congress and Janata Dal secular. So here the people from the Congress, MLAs from the Congress have resigned, and this resignation of the Congress put the coalition unstable or put them before the no confidence motion in the legislative assembly. So, in this context, two offices that become very much important, one is governor, the second one is speaker. The governor has to call the assembly for session, and the speaker has to admit the no confidence motion. So, in this case, most of the times governors act in accordance with the suggestions from central government. That's why they are criticized as the agents of the center. And coming to the speaker's role, as he is from the ruling party, obviously the speaker tries to play to the tunes of the ruling party. So then we have to wait and see what happens there. Plan for district eco panels draws fire is the next article. So, environmental impact assessment, what does this mean? Any project before it is being undertaken, what is the loss it is causing to the environment? It has to be taken up, and this procedure is called EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment. There are authorities at the national level, state level. Now we are creating a district environmental impact assessment authority. Now, as per the EIA notification, district magistrate, that is the collector, is the head of this district environmental impact assessment authority. What are the issues over here? Who has to give the mining permissions? District collector. And the second, who has the targets for greater mining in the district? District collector. In these circumstances, the district collector will have a conflict of interest. One way he has to seek the revenue from the mining, other way he has to protect the environment through EIA. Then in this context, he will be more interested towards the targets than where EIA goes into the background. And the second is he a technical person to properly conduct the EIA? No, he is not a technical person. Competence is missing. These are the two issues over here. And the next, Talaq bill in a cliffhanger in Rajya Sabha. The triple Talaq bill, it means if a husband gives divorce through triple Talaq or instantaneously, remember, as per the Muslim law, personal law, so triple Talaq has to be spaced 90 days, spread over 90 days. It means that so first talaq, second talaq, third talaq have to be spread over 90 days, and then there has to be negotiations between the husband and wife. So there are certain rules for saying triple talaq. But one variant of the triple talaq is instantaneous talaq. Now what is being declared as illegal is the instantaneous triple talaq. It is not the triple talaq as a whole. Triple talaq spread over 90 days is not a crime. There are two things. One is annulment of the marriage, the second one is related to criminality. What is annulment? If any person gives the divorce towards through saying triple talaq instantaneously, then obviously it is getting annulled. But as law says, as per the Supreme Court judgment and also law which is pending before the Parliament, thus that marriage which is annulled will be revived by the courts. And the second part is any person who is giving the instantaneous triple talaq has to face the criminality. It means he can be put into jail. So most of the political parties are opposed to this criminality clause, because if the husband most of the times is the breadwinner, if he has been put in the prison, obviously it is going to bring in suffering to the entire family. So a second is with regard to annulment clause, already the Supreme Court judgment is there for the annulment. What is the need for a new law? This is how it is being opposed for. And finally, thank you much. Have a great day. All the best.